organization and I'm reporting on my PPR for my grant I was just awarded, I would look at the 2-digit number at the end and assume that the highest number contains my grant. So as you see here, the number 88 is highlighted because since that's the most recent, that's where I would first look for my PPR for my grant. So once I identify the correct grantee name, in the report name box, I will choose the Program Performance Form, CED. That's how you locate your PPR. The SF429 can also be accessed through the dropdown on this menu. So if you are submitting that in OLDC, this is how you would access it. So once you select Program Performance Form in the report name dropdown, in step 4, the funding grant period, you will select your grant number. So you'll see on this screen, there's a date range and there's the 90EE, which is the start of every grant number. So this box is where you'll pick the grant that you want to report the PPR on. So this is what's important if you do have multiple grants. In this box, it'll list the grant numbers that are associated with this grantee name with that 2-digit number. So at this point, if you realize that you did select the wrong grant name in the previous dropdown, you can go back and change it. So once you have confirmed that you selected the correct grant, you'll choose the correct reporting period in the table. So this is a very important step because it's important that you complete your report for the correct reporting period, because if you do not, there's no way to change the reporting period, and you'll actually have to go back and delete the report that you submitted for the wrong reporting period and resubmit your information. So to avoid this problem, you'll always want to make sure that you select the radio button next to the dates for the correct reporting period. Once you have confirmed that you selected the correct reporting period, in the Select Action box, you'll select that New Edit Revise option and then hit Next. So you'll see on this slide that we selected the Program Performance Form to access the PPR, but there's also an option to select the SF429 form. And this form is a standard form that's used to collect information related to real property. You are only required to complete this form if your project used CED funds to acquire or renovate real property and you establish federal interest in that property. So you should check your NGA to get information about whether you need to complete this form or not. And if you're unsure whether or not to complete it, you can always contact your grants management specialist. And there are 4 subforms which you access through this page in OLDC. So if this form is applicable to your grant, this is where you complete it. So after you select that New Edit Revise Report option that I showed you on this slide, you're actually able to get into the system. And it will take you to the Report Sections page. So it lists the 4 sections of the PPR, and from here you can access each form by selecting the Edit section from the dropdown like you see on your screen. So it lists all 4 forms here, which as a reminder are first the cover page, which collects some basic information about your grant, Form A, which is the Performance Measures form, which is where you'll report on number of positions created and businesses created throughout your grant, so the quantitative data. And then Form B is Program Indicators, which is where you'll kind of tell the story about your grant, and it provides you with a place to discuss any changes or successes or challenges and provide greater detail on what's going on with your project. And finally, Form E is where you will collect some financial data about your project. So the first is the cover page. You don't really need to edit anything on this page until you're marking a report as final. But your first time reporting, you should just kind of go through this information and confirm the information is correct. And if anything is not, like if your organization name or address is incorrect on the cover page, you should notify your program specialist so they can advise you how to update this information in GrantSolutions. The cover page is also where you will add your electronic signature, which will certify the report in the system. You certify your report once it's complete and you're ready to submit it, so we'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation, but just wanted to point out that that is where you will electronically sign the report. So review the information on the cover page. If something is incorrect, you want to notify your program specialist. But if everything looks good, you can hit save and then go on to the next section, which is the button on the bottom right of the screen. And selecting that will take you to Form A, which you will update the data in the actual to date column field, which is highlighted here on your screen. So this is the information like the number of businesses that were created or expanded, and information about the positions you create, the employees, and your leverage funds. To the right of that column is an explanation field, which is where you can elaborate on the numbers that you enter in the actual to date column. So if you didn't create any jobs for this first reporting period, you'll be able to, in the explanation field, explain why that is. So if there was a delay in construction because of weather or something with your finances that delayed being able to create jobs, you can provide an explanation in this field. Or if you created 10 jobs in this reporting period, in this field you could list the positions, what businesses they were associated with, just to provide your program specialist with as much information as possible. You'll also notice the baseline column here, which is 2 to the left of the actual to date column. And this is where your baseline data will be. So for all of your when you're reporting for the first time, your baseline data for all indicators will be 0 because you've never entered a PPR before. But in future reporting periods, this will be the data that you submitted in the PPR for the previous reporting period. So if in this reporting period you created 1 business, the next time you report for the next reporting period, that baseline column will say 1. This helps show a comparison of how your project is progressing through the reporting period. And that middle column is the project target column, and these are the number of businesses, jobs, and employees, and the amount of leverage funds that you propose in your application. So this kind of helps to show you how on track you are to reaching your project goals. So you'll go through and you'll enter information in the actual to date column of Form A, and you'll provide an explanation where you need to. If you ever input a 0 in the actual to date column, the system does require you to put something in the explanation field, but we actually advise you to use that explanation field because it provides your program specialist with more information. So definitely provide as much information as possible. And as you're going through and entering information in Form A, you want to save your work as often as possible. You can also validate your work as you go, so you can enter in some numbers and save and validate them, which will alert you if there's any errors in your data. And again, if you use the data collection tool before entering your data into Form A, there's some validations built into that tool that are the same as that are built into OLDC, so it can kind of help you avoid making some data errors in the system. Once you complete Form A and you save and validate it and you've cleared up all the errors, you can move on to Form B by selecting the Next Section button. And this will take you to Form B, which is the explanation, the qualitative form, so you're able to provide more explanations and explain the numbers that you put into Form A. This is really where you get to elaborate on the data that you provided in Form A around all of the indicators, and allows you to kind of tell the story about your project beyond just the numbers. So this is really a place to discuss the success of your project, or you can explain any challenges or obstacles that your project is facing. This is particularly important because it lets your program specialist know what's really going on. And if you're behind in business or job creation goals, you do want to elaborate on that in this form. Don't be afraid to talk about any challenges that you're facing, because it does allow your program specialist to help you overcome these challenges, and they can provide you with some necessary resources or technical assistance to ensure the success of your project. So the more information, the better. Again, as you enter information in this field, select Save very often. And then when you complete this section, you can move on to navigate to Form E by, again, hitting that Next Section button. And Form E is where you enter your financial information about your project. So in the second column here called Activity Description, this is where you'll describe the activity and kind of explain what you were drawing funds down for. So here you might put that the activity was construction, or if you purchased equipment, or if you drew funds down to make a loan to a participating business, you will explain that in the Activity Description field. And then in column 4, Funding Expended, you will list the amount expended for that specific activity. So when I mentioned navigating through the forms, I refer to the next section button a lot, which is if you're going through and completing Form A and then moving on to Form B, and you can use those next section buttons. But realistically, as you're going through and completing the PPR, you're probably skipping around between forms and sections, and you can do that by navigating through the different forms using the Report Sections page. So from any page within the Report Form Entry section, you can see options on the top of the menu bar. So you'll see here it's OLDC Home, Form Selection, Report Sections, and Report Form Status. So we recommend you use this menu bar to navigate between pages rather than using the back button in the browser. And then on this Report Section page, this is where you can kind of jump around between forms. So if you're working in the cover page and you want to skip to Form B, you can select the Report Sections from the top navigation bar. You'll see Report Sections is highlighted and it's bolded at the top. And then on the Report Section page, you see on your screens, you can select Edit Section from the Form B dropdown and then select Go, and that'll bring you right to Form B. So you can kind of jump around through the forms. You don't have to go from A to B to E, and this page makes it a little bit easier to navigate. As you're working through the forms and saving and validating, you'll also notice that your PPR goes through a variety of different stages. So as you're filling in information, it's a really common mistake that grantees may think that they've entered in all their information in the PPR and that they're done and that it's submitted. But when in reality, it might not be submitted unless you see a submitted status of your report and you receive that automated email from the OLDC system. So unless it's in the status submitted, your program specialist cannot review the PPR. So it's important to become familiar with the different stages that your PPR goes through so you know when a report has been successfully submitted or if you need to take some more steps. So when you first open your PPR from the reporting period, it will be in the stage Initialize, which just means that you've accessed your report at least once, but never saved any data. So when you access your PPR for the first time for this reporting period, the first status it will be in is Initialize, which means it's been started. Saved means that you've entered some or all of the data in your report and you clicked Save, which again, we recommend you do many times throughout reporting. Validated means that you have entered some or all of your data in your report and clicked Validate, which checks your data for errors. So you can validate as you go, as I mentioned earlier, or you can validate at the end when you've entered in all your information. Certified means that you have completed adding data to your report and you have saved and validated and you want to certify, which means to add your electronic signatures to the report. Certified should not be confused with submitted. So this is another common question that we get a lot. But once you certify your report, it means that you signed the report that the data is accurate, but you still are required to click Submit to submit your report to OCS through the system. Otherwise, they cannot review it if it's only in Certified. So once you do select that Submit button in the system, your report could be in a submitted status, which means you've completed your report and selected Submit, and your program specialist is able to review it. At this point, you and your program specialist will get an email from the system that says it's been successfully submitted. After you submit your report, it could also be in the Submitted with Warning status, which is the system's way of reminding you that if you made a change to any certain fields within Form B, that you just need to let your program specialist know about it. So there's certain error messages that you cannot submit your report unless they're cleared up, but there's warning messages that are kind of just an alert to you to let you know that if something's changed in your project, to let your program specialist know, but you can still submit an OLDC. When you've submitted your report and your program specialist is reviewing your PPR, it will be in Submission in Review by CO status. And if your report moves to submission accepted by CO, that means that your report has been reviewed and accepted by your program specialist. And if your report is accepted, you'll also get an email from the system letting you know. Or you could have a submission returned by CO status, which means that your program specialist reviewed your PPR, but needs you to make some edits or clarify some information before they can accept it. So they actually knock it back to you in the system. So you'll also be notified via email if your PPR is returned, and your program specialist will contact you to explain why your report was not accepted and ask you to resubmit your report with some changes. And then after your changes are made, you will need to resubmit your PPR and OLDC. But if you're ever unsure of what stage your report is in, you can always check the report progress timeline that you see here on your slide. That kind of lets you know where it's at any given time. And again, if your report is in the certified status, that doesn't mean it was submitted. So unless you click the submit button, your report is not submitted, which means that your program specialist cannot review it. So one of the stages that I just talked about is validated, which basically is just a way of saying that the system is checking your data for mistakes. So like I mentioned, you can't submit your forms without validating your data. So we actually recommend that you kind of do it as you go along. You can deal with error messages in small amounts as they happen, rather than waiting until the end and having to validate and going back through all of the forms and fixing any errors. So there's a validate button for each form that allows you to do this. So while you don't need to submit all the forms separately, it does allow you to validate the forms separately, which is helpful. I think that you should kind of be expecting that you might receive some error messages when you validate your data. There are a lot of validations built in, and there's a lot of indicators that we're asking you to report on. So while some of the errors, messages you might receive might just be a small error in entering a number, or you might have just reported for the wrong indicator. So these validations kind of help you as you go along be able to identify these errors. And you'll also get an error message if you have not filled in data in the actual to date column for all indicators. So if you just accidentally skip one, it lets you know that as well. So once you've entered in all your data and you've saved it and validated it, and you've corrected all errors within each section, you can go back to the report section page and validate the entire PPR from the report section screen. So this is another, you can validate the sections individually, and then you hit this validate button to kind of validate the entire report. Once you do that, the certify button will appear, and that means that the report has been successfully validated and that you have no errors and that you're ready to sign and submit. So once you select that blue certify button, it brings you back to the cover page. So this is the section I mentioned earlier in the presentation. That means that you can sign, you will hit that click to sign button, which means that you've signed your report with your electronic signature and that you're kind of verifying that all of the data that you've entered is accurate. And it's important to, once you certify the report, you're not able to make any additional edits to it. So if you certify and then you think of something you want to go back and change, you have to uncertify the report in order to make additional edits. Once you have certified your report, you're ready to submit. So only the person with the appropriate role will be able to see the submit button. So if you're the data entry person at your organization, you might be able to enter in all the information and certify the report, but the authorized official or project contact at your organization may be the one that has to submit the report. So you'll see highlighted on this screen, there's that submit button that you'll select once you're ready to submit it to your program specialist, and it's also highlighted that uncertified button that I just mentioned. So if you do last minute find that you need to make an edit, you'll uncertify, make the edit, recertify, and then you can submit. So the process of submitting might be a little bit confusing, especially if it's your first time using the system. And keep in mind that a certified report is not submitted, and you only have successfully submitted a report when you select that blue submit button and you get that automated email from the system that says that it's been submitted. So like I mentioned, after you submit the report, your program specialist will review it. And if they accept the report, you'll get an email from the system that says it's accepted and there's no further action needed from you until your next PPR is due for the next reporting period. But for some of you, the program specialist might review your report and have questions or need more information, and they will return the report to you in the system, and that will knock it into submission return status. You'll also receive a message from the automated email system letting you know that it has been returned. So at this point, we get a lot of questions from grantees asking, my PPR has been returned in the system and I'm supposed to make changes, but I don't know how to edit and resubmit the report. So if your program specialist does reject a submitted PPR, it's probably because the PPR was lacking some detail or the program specialist needs some clarification on some information provided in the report. So if the report is returned, you'll get that automated email from the system, and you'll also be notified by your program specialist, and they'll kind of outline the specific information that they want edited in the PPR or let you know any additional information that they need clarification on. So when you go into the PPR to make these edits, it will be in the status submission returned by CO. And in this status, you cannot make any edits. So to actually make the edits once the report is returned, you need to select the Unsubmit button. So that's highlighted on this screen. So you'll navigate to the report form status page and select the blue Unsubmit report button. This will knock your report into certified status, which, as I mentioned earlier, you cannot edit a PPR when it's in that certified status. To make any edits, you'll have to navigate to the report section page and select Uncertified. So always remember, when you need to edit a returned PPR, you first need to unsubmit the report and then uncertify the report. And then at this point, you will be able to edit the report, make any changes, and then kind of go through that process again of validating the report, certifying it, and resubmitting it. When you get a returned PPR, you'll always be contacted by your program specialist with the information that they want you to address. So this may be that they want you to clarify names of businesses that you've created or expanded, or want some more information on the positions that you've created. Or if you did not create any jobs during the reporting period and didn't provide any information in Form A or Form B about why that was, they'll want you to update that. So keep in mind as you're completing the report to provide as much detailed information as possible to avoid getting a returned PPR. And again, this is also helpful for your program specialist to let them know what's going on in your project in case you do need some additional resources or technical assistance. So just as a reminder, as you're kind of going through and reporting on your PPR, you can submit your report with warnings, but any errors must be resolved before the report can be submitted. I mentioned this briefly, but a few kind of typical errors that you can expect would be if you leave a field blank that requires a number. Or if you enter 0 in an actual to date column for Form A and you don't provide an explanation, you'll get an error message. Or if your baseline number ever exceeds the actual to date number in Form A. Or if a TANF recipient employed exceeds the number of individuals with low income employed. So just common errors like this with your data will flag an error from the system, and then within the system it'll explain to you why you're receiving that error. So most of the time the errors are pretty, they'll make sense to you, they're pretty common sense, and it's just sometimes data entry errors. But if you're ever not sure why you're getting an error, or if you cannot figure out how to resolve it, you can contact us at OCS Registrar and we can help you. So as you're kind of walking through your PPR and submitting it, this is a good visual to refer to because it kind of walks you through all of the different stages. And just to reiterate, as you enter data, you will save the report frequently and then validate the report as you go to clear up any data errors. Once you have done that, taking care of all the errors, you will certify the report, which means that you've signed it. And at this point, you can no longer go back and make edits. And if you do realize you need to make an edit before submitting, you must uncertify first. But if you certify and you're ready to submit, you'll select the Submit Report button, which officially submits the report to your program specialist. At that point, your program specialist will review the report. If they accept your report, you have fulfilled your reporting requirements for that reporting period. But if the program specialist returns the report, you do need to make edits and resubmit.